No pressure.
Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à WPCampus. Je vais vous présenter une site multilingual en WordPress. Got that, right?
Yeah.
So, if you didn't, then maybe your website's visitors didn't get what you're saying either. Which is why you want to create your websites in multiple languages, if your audience might be coming in and speaking different languages. So, as was introduced, my name is Shawn Hooper. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Actionable Books. We are a learning and development company, and we've created a platform that enables teams to have offline conversations and then use our platform to start developing micro habits by changing something in their behavior day-to-day in the workplace. So that's the joy I get now every day, is working in that environment. But when we started building that platform, we did so using WordPress. So I developed a lot of experience there in building applications using WordPress, and part of that was in multilingual sites. So I thought I'd share that with you today. So I've been using WordPress since 2009, both as a freelance developer in government environment and now in the private sector. I speak English, French, and according to my friends and family, nerd as well. I think that's an official language. Yes. So let's get started. There's a couple of terms that I'd like to go through if you're not familiar with them. Just these are words that you'll see used a lot when we're talking about creating multilingual websites. Internationalization, localization, languages, and locales are what we're going to look at. So the first thing is, what is a language? And the Oxford Dictionary says it's a method of human communication, either spoken or written, consisting of the use of words in a structured and conventional way. Examples of languages would be English, French, Spanish, Italian. Whereas locales, in computing, are a set of parameters that define a user's language, region, and any special variant preferences the user wants to see in their user interface. It's a combination of a language identifier and a regional identifier. So here's some examples of locales. So even though we might be speaking about English, Canadian English and US English are two different things. And it's amazing how people will pick up on these things right away. When we launched our platform at Actionable, the development team that's building it is in Australia. So the initial, when we went beta, all the initial screens were in Australian English. And right away, the American users picked up on it and said, that word is spelled wrong. Oh, no, it was spelled right, it just wasn't US English. So locales are just as important as the language itself. Internationalization, you'll also see the short form when people are writing about it online to I-18N. That is the process of planning and implementing your site so that it can be easily adapted into a language or culture. So that is the first step you would want to do, which is getting your site ready to be created in multiple languages. You then have localization, also known as L10N, or lion as someone thought it was the other day, is the process of adapting the product or content to a specific locale. So that is taking your internationalized site and then creating it actually in the individual locales that you want to present it in. Now when we're talking about creating multilingual websites, we don't need to just worry about the words that are on the page and just translating them. There's things you need to worry about. For example, currency. In English, we use the $sign before the value. Thousands are separated with a comma, and the dollars and cents are separated with a period. In French, your thousands are separated with a space. The dollars and cents are separated with a comma, and the $sign comes afterwards. So if you were building an e-commerce platform, this would be very important to know. Displaying of dates. In the US, it's month, day, and year is the order that you present in. In Canadian English, it's day, month, and year. If you're using the ISO standard, it's year, month, and day. when you're presenting time. 4:30 p.m. That's how we write the time. In French, 16H30. They use the 24-hour clock and they use an H to separate the hours and minutes. Script direction. Well, we read everything from right to left, from the top left corner down to the bottom right hand corner. But if you're looking at Arabic languages, Persian languages, Hebrew, Yiddish, they read from right to left. So your website needs to accommodate that layout. Here's an example of a page from a Government of Canada website that is in English. It's talking about doing business with Canada if you're in Jordan. So you'll notice the language switcher up in the top left, first of all, has Arabic writing in it. And if you switch to that page, the entire page is flipped so that the menu is now on the right-hand side of the screen. The breadcrumbs are on the right-hand side of the screen. And all of the text is read from right to left. So there's the English, there's the Arabic. So not only is it just changing the words, but the entire layout of the page is reversed. Text length. It would be really nice if the words in every language were the same length. Especially, for print designers, things like that, it would be fantastic. So this is actually a real bug that occurred in WordPress core. It was fixed in version 4.0. This was actually my first contribution to WordPress core, changing one line of CSS. So what would happen is when you switched from English to German, this button got a little bit longer. German is notorious for having very long words for things. And the button pushed into all sorts of other text and made things quite ugly. So that had to get reworked. So that's something that you need to consider when creating a multilingual site is, do you have enough space in your interface for the words that you're going to use? So those are things that you want to consider when you're creating a multilingual website. And that, it really doesn't matter what platform you're using. That's just basic considerations when you're dealing with multiple languages. Now we'll cover off how you do this in WordPress. WordPress's core is available in 162 locales. As of the last time I checked, which was this morning. 52 of those are 100% ready, up to date with WordPress 4.5.3. In that every word that shows up in the out-of-the-box installation of WordPress is translated and ready to go in those 52 languages, or 52 locales. These are all managed by a team of volunteers known as the Polyglots team. So just like there's teams that work on training, that work on core development, that work on the WordPress.tv site, there's a team that all they worry about is making sure that WordPress is available in different languages and translating all of those strings with each release that comes out. When you install WordPress, you're given the option to pick which language you want to install WordPress core in. And this will affect how your WP admin interface shows up and all the default strings that come with WordPress core. So, although WordPress core comes in all of these languages, that doesn't help you at all with translating the actual content that's in your posts and presenting those in multiple languages. So there's a couple of options that we can look at for doing this. First of all, there's a couple of plugins that will help you in creating multilingual websites, and we'll compare a couple of those. First one is WPML, WordPress Multilingual. It's a premium plugin from on-the-go systems, and it supports translating of posts, pages, custom post types, taxonomies, menus, the text that appears in your theme, and text generated by plugins. It can make sure that all of that is available in the different languages that you set up. So it looks like this. So here's a list of my pages on this website. And in addition to seeing the page titles, You also have the flags representing the different languages this site is available in, and the little pencils to be able to go in and edit the post in that language. It stores each post as a separate post in the WordPress database and then associates them to each other so that you can link back and forth between the posts. Along the top, you'll see you can switch. So right now I'm looking at posts that are in Hindi. I could switch in this one, it's also in Vietnamese. I could just click on the tab if I just wanted to see the Vietnamese posts. When you're in the post editor, there's a new box that appears in the top right-hand corner that says this page is in French Canadian, and it's a translation of the English page Terms of Use Agreement. And it allows you then to switch back over to that. Or if I had just updated the English document, rewritten entirely, I could say overwrite this with the new English text, and then I can start going in and re-editing it with the French as appropriate. So it gives you those tools. It allows you to set up what format you want for your permalink structure. So I could say I want the different languages to be subdirectories. So example.com/en for the English, example.com/es for the Spanish. You could set that. You could say, as this screen is showing, that I want it to be subdomains. So fr.example.com would be the French site, where en.example.com would be the English. And then you probably set up a splash screen to allow the users coming in to pick which language they want coming in. Or you could set it up that the language is a parameter in your query string. So example.com/home/?lang equals fr would load the French version of the home page in that example. So you can set all of those options depending on how you want to lay it out. My preference is for the subdirectory to go domain/en. That's my personal preference. With the custom post types, WPML allows you to choose which custom post types can be translated. So just on-off toggle. So in this case, one of my custom post types is the blog on this site that we're not translating. It's being presented in English only, so it's just set to do not translate. Custom taxonomies. Same thing, you can say which ones need to be translated, which ones don't. And when you're modifying your taxonomies, it gives you the different languages so that you can go and set up the name of that term in each language. In WPML, this is just a little pro tip that I found out the hard way working on a client site a couple years ago. There's this little checkbox that says adjust IDs for multilingual functionality. And what that does is, because in your JavaScript or your CSS, you may be referring to certain pages by their post ID, because that creates the body class. You can have it sync it up so that it switches all those IDs to be the same as the primary language. Unfortunately, that's a very heavy task for it to do. It creates a lot of calls to the database. So if you don't need that, which most people don't, make sure that that checkbox is turned off. In doing that, I had a homepage on this website that made 759 calls to the database to load the homepage. Not the most efficient thing in the world. Turning off that checkbox reduced it to 250, which was still a lot of calls, but much more reasonable. QTranslate X is another plugin that we can use to do multilingual websites. It's freely available on the WordPress.org repository. And if any of you have worked, has anyone here done a multilingual website already? So QTranslate is one that's been available for a long time. QTranslate X is a fork of that original plugin that is now being updated and maintained. It's the original QTranslate plugin. The author is no longer maintaining it. So when I talk about using QTranslate X, I'll get people saying, Oh, but I heard that wasn't a good one to use anymore. This is a new updated version that is being maintained and has a lot of features that the original QTranslate did not. It supports translation of posts, pages, custom post types, taxonomies, menus, general settings, and your widgets. And it gives you an interface that looks like this. So, as a WPML, they're using flags along the top to identify different languages. And the real difference comes when you get into the post editor. You get your languages along the top, and along the side of any piece of the screen that is translatable with QTranslate X, it shows up with that red bar along the side. So as you switch languages, that bar will switch to the color associated with that language and the content will change all in the same screen. It uses shortcodes internally to manage the translations, so all of the content is actually stored in the same post. The one thing to note with those is custom fields. So your post meta is not translatable. You can see that this field down here does not have the red bar down the side, so it is not being translated. Now, the downside to using a plugin that stores everything in shortcodes is that if you decide to disable that plugin and go a different route, all of your content now has shortcodes in it separating the languages. So you would have to go back into your posts and tidy all of that up afterwards. Just a note about any, and that's the same for any plugin that makes use of shortcodes in your page content, is that if you disable that plugin, you'll end up with the shortcodes sitting there in your text. QTranslate X, you can translate widgets the same way. So you have your text widget sitting in your sidebar, you can switch between languages at the top, and the widget title and the content of the widget will change into that language so you can set the content appropriately. In some other options where the plugin does not allow for widget translation, you would have to do separate widgets in each language and then use conditional logic to decide whether or not to show that widget based on the current language being shown. So this way of doing it is really nice. I like the way that QTranslate X has implemented this. Menus, same thing. You get all your languages, you can switch between menus and set all the text on your menu items. As with the first plugin we looked at, you can also choose how you want the permalinks to be displayed when using QTranslate X. Query strings, path modes, domain modes. And same with general settings. Of course, your site name, your tagline, you want these to be able to be translated as well. So it gives you the flags as well. Pick the language you want and set the values for those fields in your general settings tab. There's another plugin called Babel. This is a plugin that Automatic bought, and as you can see in this tweet that I'm quoting, Andrew Nason, who is the lead developer of WordPress, had said, "I like Babel. If core were to tackle putting translation in or multilingual support into the core of WordPress, it'd probably look very much like the way Babel does it." Now, Babel doesn't create any additional database tables. It uses only the core tables that come with WordPress, so that supports the way VIP development works, WordPress.com development. And like WPML, translations are in separate posts. It doesn't use the shortcode format that we were just looking at with QTranslate X. It supports the translation of posts, pages, custom post types, taxonomies, menus, and widgets. And they use a side-by-side editor format like this. Now, I have played with Babel. Personally, it's not my favorite solution. They haven't made many changes. They haven't made any changes to it in, I think, about a year and a half now. And I feel like it still has quite a ways to go to catch up to the first two plugins that we looked at in that. but I did want to show it as it is definitely an option that you could use. Getting away from plugins, if that's not the approach that you want to use to create your site, you could also use WordPress Multisite. So there's two ways of using multiple sites to create your different languages. You could just do separate installs of WordPress for every language. Doesn't sound like a great idea, and if you want to hear horror stories of having multiple WordPress installs, I suggest you go see Mike Corcom's talk tomorrow about Carleton University's 400 WordPress websites that make up their campus. Or we use WordPress Multisite and use the capabilities that it has to allow handling of multiple languages. So with one WordPress install, we could create a site in English, Spanish, and French, all from one installation. So you would create a network site with subsites for each language, and then you can use plugins like the Multisite Language Switcher plugin or the Xanto WP Translation plugin for multi-sites. These are two options that will then help you to associate a post or a page in one multi-site subsite to another one, so that you can provide that back and forth linking between content. If you don't use language switchers like this, the only option you have is to say, okay, if you're in the English site and you want to go to the Spanish site, probably sending them to the home page, where these plugins would allow you to switch between the same content in multiple languages, which is a much better user experience. So the plugins that we looked at, I've made this little comparison table, and these slides will be available on my website right after this talk, but it shows you sort of the pros and cons of each of the plugins, how they deal with content storage, widget areas, handling of media, their permalinks, custom fields taxonomies, strings in plugins, database impact, and translation service support, which we have not talked about yet. We'll get to that in a little bit. But you may want to reference this if you're trying to decide which approach to go. So that's talking about we've talked about the options that allow you to modify the content of your site within the CMS. So the post content, the titles, the widgets, the taxonomies, all that. But then there's the deal with translating the strings that appear in your themes and in plugins. So if you have a good example, your 404 page. That text that comes up when that page shows up, how do you make sure that that shows up in the correct language? So there is a set of files that can be associated with any theme or any plugin. And this comes from a system called the getText format. And it includes three file formats, a POT, a PO, and an MO file. POT files are a template, and they will have all of the strings that appear on your page in this file, and say these ones need to be translated, or need to be available for translation. The .po files are the translations between that template and the language you're targeting. So it will have the translation of the strings into the language for that file. And the .mo file is a machine-compiled version of the PO file that just makes it run faster. So these are the three files that you will see as you're dealing with multilingual. Many popular themes and plugins come with these files provided in many languages, either directly from the authors or from users of that theme or plugin who have contributed translations to the project because they needed it for their own purposes, so they gave back as part of the wonderful community that is WordPress. But if the translation's not available, you could do it on your own. There's some translation management plugins that you can use that are available in the WordPress repository, or some that you can buy as well. This one here is called Loco Translate. So it'll show you the source text. So in this case, we're on a button that says add, and it needs a translation. So in German, you can go and type in the word for add, and it will update that in An add button, this is probably in a plugin, so it would update that plugin so that it shows up appropriately. PioEdit. This is my favorite tool for managing theme and plugin translations. It is a freemium desktop application available for PC and Mac to allow you to manage your get text files, and it's also available in Linux. Sorry. One of the great things that it has in it is some statistics. So number of words needing to be translated, number of words that have already been translated, number of strings, some basic stats. Where this becomes very useful, and I think this is only in the paid version of PioEdit, is if you're working with a professional translator, quite often they will want to bill you by the word, and so this gives you your word count to check on the invoicing, which is kind of handy. Yeah, that's the $20 Pro version provides the statistics, but the other really handy thing, if you've developed a custom theme, custom plugin, is it will go through and scan all the PHP files in your theme or plugin and find all of the strings that need translating and build that POT file itself. So you don't have to manually do that. It'll do it right from the source code to help out all the wonderful WordPress developers. And this is what its interface looks like. So again, you have strings that need translating. We have the English strings on the left. On the right, we have the missing Spanish. So you would type that in below in the translation box. And because this is a really helpful product, it gives you translation suggestions based on other people who have translated that string in PioEdit. It gives you that recommendations in the top right-hand corner. It also supports putting in notes to the translators. So you can say, well, this phrase is used in this context, because with a lot of languages, you need the context around why this word is being used to understand how to translate it appropriately. So you can put notes into the translators through here as well, which is useful. GlotPress is a project developed by the WordPress community. It's still a work in progress, but the intention of GlotPress is that plugin authors and theme authors will not have to worry about creating multilingual support. They will be required to make their plugins and themes internationalized, so ready to be localized. And then through GlotPress, the community will be able to go in and provide translations or corrections to existing translations for any plugin in the WordPress repository and any theme in the WordPress repository. So it's opening up the ability to make these plugins support more and more languages to a much bigger audience that may not understand how to work with PO files and commit changes to the repositories and everything. It puts it all into a web interface. I have a screenshot of it after that I'll show you. But the one thing I want to talk about is content translation. How do we do that? Just, I don't know, throw it all into Google Translate, right? That sounds like a good way to do it. Please don't. No automatic translation. They're horrible. You'll end up with, word-for-word translations that don't make any sense if you actually know the language, or the wrong context, all these things. So what you do want to do is work with professional translators. I don't care what city you're in, you will find people who will be available to help translate your content professionally. The ones I've worked with usually charge by the word, so be ready for that. But you will get much higher quality content than if you throw everything into Google Translate. Some of the solutions that we've looked at also have built-in translation service support. So ICANN Localize is a service that works with WPML. So when you write a post in English, you can then say, okay, this post is ready to be translated into Spanish, and it'll get sent off to ICANN Localize, where a translator will pick it up, translate it for you manually. So a person will be sitting there translating it, and then when they're done, they can submit the translation back in for you to know that it's ready to then publish on your site. So they've created a workflow around translation of content. Lingotech is another service that does this, and it works. There's another plugin we didn't talk about called Polylink. That's the one that they work with, which will do a similar thing. So if you don't have on-site translators, this can be a nice way to manage it all from within the WordPress interface without having to cut and paste the content back out to Word documents, ship them off to translators, things like that. Contributing to the WordPress multilingual support, of course, as with everything in WordPress, it is run by an amazing team of worldwide volunteers who love WordPress and want to make it better. And language is no different. The Polyglots team is responsible for ensuring that WordPress is available in dozens of languages and many more regions. It's a big job, which is why they need help from native speakers in as many languages as possible. So if you think this is something you might be interested in, if you go to the make.wordpress.org/polyglots page, there's information about how to get involved with that team and how to start contributing updates to the many languages that WordPress is now available in. Translate.wordpress.org is the website now powered by that GlotPress product I was speaking about earlier that allows you to provide translations to the WordPress core, all the themes, all the plugins, and all the meta projects, as long as they have been set up to be internationalized. And it looks like this. So I am looking at this is the 4.4 branch of WordPress in Spanish, and it allows me just to go in and through the web interface enter the translation for that string and submit it. So I don't need to understand how to work with POT files, PO files, these desktop tools and that. I just work on the translate.wordpress.org site and do it there. And those files then will be contributed back into the product and available for everyone else to use. Thank you very much. That is my presentation on multilingual WordPress sites. These slides will be available on my website shortly after I get off the stage here. And links as well to all the plugins I spoke about, the software for translating the different services. I've included all of those in a blog post that will be going live shortly. With that, does anyone have any questions? Pardon me?
Repeat for live stream.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going back quickly for WPML for multi-site. Now I'm talking about multi-site not from the standpoint of I want to run different sites with different languages. What is the same site in different languages?
Right.
But rather I have a multi-site. I have one of those sites on the multi-site that I want to be able to do
In multiple
WPML type multi-language stuff.
Yeah.
Will it work nicely with multi-site?
So the question was, if you have a WordPress multi-site network and you want one of the sites in that network to be multilingual, would WPML or any of the solutions we talked about today support that? I haven't tried it, but I do believe it would be supported.
Yes, it works.
It is? Okay, perfect, thank you.
Oh, cool.
So you could take a site in your multi. When you did that, which solution did you use?
Oh, what do you mean?
To try doing one site in a multi-site network, multilingual? Was it WPML? Was it?
It was
QTranslate?
WPML, and the main side of our multi-site network was just in English, but then there was one subsite that's English and Chinese.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much. So one of our volume members just said they did this using WPML and it worked. I'm repeating everything for the live stream. So in the context of higher ed, you can see that being useful where you may have a department on campus that is teaching another language. And so that department's website, you would want to have available in the native language that you're teaching as well as in the primary language of the campus. But you might not want the entire university's website translated, for example. So, good question. Anyone else?
Yeah.
If somebody's browsing in a particular locale and there's not content available for a specific page, how do the different solutions handle that?
So, question being, if not everything is translated, so you're browsing in one language, but you don't have content available in that language, you need to start looking at how do the solutions handle that. That gets a little tricky, but one of the things you could do, for example, in your blog index, let's say, you could say, only show me posts that are available in this language. You could code your theme to only return those posts. If there is no translation available, it wouldn't be there. Or you could say, have it show all the posts and fall back to the default language if it's not available in this locale. In that case, you might want to put, and this would require custom encoding, but what I would do is I would put in a banner of some sort in the locale that you're expecting it to be, to say, we're sorry, but this post has not been translated, and with maybe an option of how to contact the author for more information, something like that. Any other questions? Yep.
How do these solutions handle different images that you want to put in there? Maybe if you have, showing different diversity representations within pictures for different countries.
Right. So how do these solutions handle media? So images embedded in your posts, videos, things like that. So what you would have to do is upload in your media library different versions of the images, if they have text in them, that are in those locales. And then when you're modifying your post, you'd switch out those images. I believe there are some plugins that will split the media library into multiple languages, but you are looking at uploading multiple copies and then modifying the posts. There's no direct correlation between the images. That being said, I would encourage everyone to limit the amount of text that you have in your images, because that is an accessibility issue. If you have lots of text in your images, there's other things you're going to have to deal with to make those images, viewable by people with various disabilities. So I would try and make your images as language neutral as possible, and then that sort of, kills two birds with one stone.
Following on that idea, if you had captions for the pictures, do any of the plugins affect that panel on the right-hand side of the media library?
So the question being, do any of these plugins manage the translation of captions from the media library? And I don't know, to be honest. I would have to go look at that.
WPML has a plugin to do that.
So it's that's an add. That's right. WPML has a media add-on that that will take care of that. That's right.
Sweet.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that. Okay, we got 5 minutes left. Any last questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming out here and attending the first session in the morning. And enjoy the rest of WPCampus.